And I was still very new at the factory, and the coworkers were always offering you something. Hey, Lula, aren't you going to eat? No, I am not feeling hungry at the moment. And every time they took a bite of their mortadella sandwich, I imagined myself biting into that sandwich. There are millions of people living with hunger in the world. I distinctly remember saying at that time, the drought in the Northeast region is primarily a problem of nature. But the hunger caused by the drought is a problem of shamelessness among those who govern the country. First, I truly want to express my gratitude to you. Hunger, a relentless sensation, truly eats away at you from the very inside. And what's even worse is that people are ashamed to say they're hungry. I'm going to tell you a story of mine. I was unemployed for a year and a half in 1965. I got a job at Fidelitous. It was the first big company where I got a job. And Fidelitous at that time didn't even have a cafeteria. People would either eat at the bar or bring a lunchbox. And I was in such a tough situation that one day I didn't bring a lunchbox. But I didn't bring a lunchbox, so I went to the bar where people ate snacks. And I was still very new at the factory, and the coworkers were always offering you something. Hey, Lula, aren't you going to eat? No, I am not feeling hungry at the moment. And every time they took a bite of their mortadella sandwich, I imagined myself biting into that sandwich. And I would just stay there the whole time, too embarrassed to say I was hungry, and then go back to work. Indeed, this particular occurrence was not an isolated incident. Rather, it transpired on numerous occasions, unfolding repeatedly over a discernible period. Each instance contributed to a pattern, solidifying the understanding that this was a recurring phenomenon. The frequency with which it manifested itself became a notable characteristic, underscoring its repetitive nature and indicating that it was a consistent element within the observed sequence of events. Consequently, one could confidently assert that this was a situation that unfolded not just once or twice, but on several distinct occasions, establishing a clear precedent for its reoccurrence and making it a well-established fact that it happened multiple times. 7 years old was when I ate bread for the first time. Because where I was born, there was no money to buy bread, and there wasn't even a place to buy bread. And on top of that, my father left my mother when I was still in her belly. My father left in 45, and I was born in 45. And many times our breakfast, if we even had any, I don't really remember if we had coffee, because sometimes we would eat a bowl of flour with black coffee. But today I think about it and realize that we didn't even have money to buy coffee. So I keep wondering how a mother manages to raise her children under these human conditions, which so many mothers still face today. And if the state, when it's carefully preparing the annual budget, doesn't decide to properly allocate some of that essential money to effectively address this critical issue, then who indeed will ultimately take care of it?
What do you do when the world's largest democracy decides it no longer needs your permission? What do you do when the world's largest democracy decides it no longer needs your permission? You push back hard. This isn't just about tariffs, it's about control. And right now, India is breaking free. The United States knows it, and it sits nervous. On July 30th, former U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to slap a 25% tariff on Indian exports. The official reason, trade imbalance. The real reason, India is rising fast, and Washington doesn't like what it can't control. Let me tell you something, as someone who conquered America from the outside, first through bodybuilding, then Hollywood, then politics, I understand what it means to challenge established power structures. And what I'm seeing now is India doing exactly what I did decades ago, refusing to play by someone else's rules and building their own path to dominance. India isn't just catching up. It's building a parallel future, and that is making old superpowers very, very uncomfortable. See, the United States has been the global pace setter for over a century, technologically, economically, even culturally, but now we're watching a new kind of nation rise, not by copying the West, but by doing something far more interesting, competing on its own terms. And as someone who never accepted being told what I couldn't achieve, I recognize this mindset immediately. India is now the 5th largest economy in the world, actually on track to hit number 3 by the end of this decade, possibly overtaking Japan and Germany. But this isn't just about GDP. This is about what kind of power India is becoming. Look at the numbers. Over 1.4 billion people, and most of them are under the age of 30. That's a tech-driven demographic explosion. 1 billion smartphones, over 900 million internet users by next year. You're basically watching the largest connected democracy ever built go online in real time. And here's the crazy part. India is doing it with homegrown tools. UPI, their digital payment system, isn't just competing with Visa and MasterCard. It's outpacing them in transaction volume. ISRO, their space agency, launched Chandrayaan-3 to the moon's south pole for less than the budget of a Hollywood movie. And yes, they're planning a crewed space flight called Gaganyaan by 2026. This kind of progress isn't random, it's strategic. India is pushing to become a leader in semiconductors, AI, quantum computing, defense manufacturing, and green energy, not by importing innovation, but by building ecosystems. And with programs like Make in India, they're not just talking, they're scaling at speed. Apple, Tesla suppliers, Google data centers, they're all moving in because India isn't just a market, it's a manufacturing alternative to China. And in a world defined by disrupted supply chains and shifting alliances, that's massive. As someone who built multiple empires by understanding systematic progression, I can tell you this is what real strategic building looks like. So what does this mean for the U.S.? Well, let's just be honest. Washington is used to being the axis of power. When the U.S. calls, countries usually listen. But India listens, and then it makes its own decisions. That's the part people in D.C. are starting to realize. India isn't becoming an ally in the traditional sense. It's becoming a pole of its own. Autonomous, independent, pragmatic. And that scares policymakers, not because India is hostile, but because it's sovereign. That's a very different kind of power, one that doesn't ask for permission. But here's where it gets interesting. This is not about rivalry. This is about multipolar stability. The idea that the future will not be dominated by one superpower, but shaped by many credible voices. And India is one of those voices now. So yes, the U.S. feels pressure. Yes, Trump's tariffs are a reaction. But let's not mistake reaction for reality, because the truth is India isn't rising to challenge anyone. It's rising because it finally can. And for 1 billion people who've waited generations for their shot, that's not a threat. That's destiny finally catching up. So yeah, if you're still wondering why the U.S. is suddenly so loud about trade deficits and Russian oil, it's not just about economics. It is about the world realizing India doesn't need to follow anymore. It's ready to lead. All right, so let's get into the real mechanics behind Trump's 25% tariff threat on India. Because this isn't just some random political outburst or a headline grab. It's a very calculated move, one driven by pressure, power dynamics, and frankly old world assumptions about how global influence should work. Let's start with trade. The U.S. has always operated under the assumption that its markets are the reward and access to them must come with strings attached. For decades, that made sense. America had the deepest pockets, the most consumers, and the tech every country wanted. But fast forward to 2025, and suddenly the game's changed. India is not just producing for America anymore, it's producing for itself and for the rest of the world. Now, Trump's team argues that Indian exports, textiles, auto parts, electronics, pharma enjoy unfair access to U.S. markets, while American goods face high tariffs in India. They say it's an excessively one-sided deal, and in raw numbers, they're partially right. For example, average Indian tariffs on U.S. farm goods around 39%. U.S. tariffs on Indian goods closer to 7%. But here's the catch. India has 1.4 billion people. Many live in rural or semi-urban areas. You can't just open the floodgates to American corn, milk, or wheat and expect local farmers to survive. This isn't protectionism. It's dome stick preservation. India's government is trying to lift hundreds of millions out of poverty without collapsing its rural economy in the process. But for Trump, nuance isn't the point. Leverage is. His approach to trade isn't about win-win. It's about win more. If you start buying Russian oil, if you start buying Russian defense systems, and if you start not letting American agriculture into your markets, he's going to squeeze you. That's the Trump doctrine, plain and simple. So when India kept buying Russian S-400 missile systems, despite CAATSA threats, and started importing discounted Russian oil during the Ukraine war, Washington took it personally. Not because India violated any treaties, it didn't, but because it made an independent decision. That's the part they couldn't digest. Let's also talk strategy. The U.S. is currently locked in a high-stakes rivalry with China. It sees India as a natural counterweight in Asia. But here's the contradiction. America wants India to be a partner, but also behave like a junior partner, and that's just not going to happen anymore. India wants strategic autonomy, the freedom to do business with the U.S., Russia, France, Japan, or whoever it chooses. That's not defiance. That's diplomacy in a multipolar world. So why now? Why did Trump go public with the tariff threat in July 2025? Because he's in campaign mode. He wants to show American voters that he's tough on trade, tough on China, tough on anyone who doesn't play fair. India just became the latest target, not because it's weak, but because it's visible. That's the irony. The more powerful India becomes, the more pressure it faces, not just from enemies, but from allies, because power attracts friction, and Trump knows that. He's using India as an example, as a warning to other nations, play by American terms or pay the price. But here's the problem with that logic. It assumes the old playbook still works, that tariffs and threats will bring countries back in line. What it doesn't account for is a new generation of nations that are self-confident, self-reliant, and not afraid of recalibrating their own path. India isn't rejecting the U.S., it's simply not submitting to it, and that's what triggered Trump. Here's something people don't realize. India is no longer playing a binary game. It's not choosing between East and West. It's building its own network. Think of it like a new kind of operating system, one that doesn't rely on just one app store. It's modular, flexible, and built for sovereignty. Yes, India buys defense equipment from Russia. That's not breaking news. But the biggest story, India is diversifying faster than almost any other country in the world. It's not stuck in a Cold War alignment, it's post-alignment. In the last 5 years, India has signed major defense and tech deals with the United States, France, Israel, the UK, and Japan, all while maintaining legacy partnerships with Russia. Let's take the Rafale deal. That wasn't just a weapons purchase. That was India signaling to Europe, we are open for strategic partnerships. France didn't just sell jets. It co-developed technologies, trained Indian engineers, and offered support for India's indigenous defense goals. That's a very different model from the old buyer-seller dependency. Then there's the India-UK 2030 roadmap, a long-term plan for collaboration on cyber defense, AI, clean energy, and digital trade. It's not flashy, but it's structural. It's creating foundations that last longer than headlines. And let's not forget Israel. India is one of its biggest defense clients and partners. Together, they've developed cutting-edge surveillance systems, drones, and missile defense tech. But here's the twist. India isn't just import ING is co-developing, localizing, and embedding this tech into its own manufacturing ecosystems, which brings us to a crucial point. India's not just buying power, it's building self-reliant defense capacity. By 2025, over 70% of India's military procurement budget was earmarked for domestic production. HAL, DRDO, Bharat Dynamics, these aren't just government agencies anymore, they're becoming global defense exporters. Now, on the civilian front, India is making smart moves too. It's quietly signing bilateral trade agreements with the UAE, Australia, South Korea, and the EU. These are not symbolic handshakes. These are supply chain restructures, green hydrogen alliances, digital trade corridors. India is not waiting for a global consensus. It's building regional resilience. It's also leading in the global south, working with Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America on infrastructure, education, and pharma access. Not to dominate, but to collaborate at scale. Think of it like a distributed system, decentralized, resilient, non-aligned, but networked. This is what Washington sometimes misses. India isn't rejecting the West. It is balancing. It still engages with Quad. It still invests in U.S. tech, but it also buys oil from Russia, buys drones from Israel, and signs climate pacts with the EU. It's not defiance. It's called freedom of choice. And honestly, that's what every country should be aiming for. A future where diplomacy isn't about taking sides, but making smart, sovereign decisions. So when Trump or any American leader pressures India to fall in line, what they're really saying is, we don't want you to choose your own path. We want you to walk ours, and that's outdated thinking, because this century doesn't belong to any one nation. It belongs to networked, diversified, sovereign states that know how to adapt and collaborate. And right now, India is doing exactly that. Let's ask the uncomfortable question no one in Washington wants to answer out loud. Is the U.S. losing global influence? The short answer, not entirely, but the monopoly is over. The long answer, it's complicated, but yes, the balance is shifting. See, for most of the 20th century, the United States wasn't just a superpower, it was the power. The dollar ruled trade, Silicon Valley ruled innovation, the Pentagon ruled deterrence, and U.S. foreign policy shaped who got what and when. But now things are moving fast. India's rise isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a larger pattern, a decentralized rebalancing of the global order. Think of it as a system upgrade. We're moving from version 1.0 US-centric unipolarity to version 2.0 multipolar collaboration. And that's where the friction begins. Let's break it down. The US still has unmatched military power, strong global alliances, and enormous cultural soft power. No question about that. But when it comes to influence, the ability to shape other countries' decisions without force, that grip is slipping. Take the US dollar. It's still the dominant reserve currency. But more countries, including India, are settling trades in local currencies. In fact, India and Russia have already traded oil in rupees. The UAE just did a deal with India using rupees and dirhams, skipping the dollar entirely. Now, that doesn't mean the dollar collapses tomorrow, but it does signal something deeper. Countries are exploring alternatives, and alternatives equal independence. Then there's diplomacy. India is a founding member of BRICS, which now includes heavyweights like Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, and others. They're building their own payment systems, energy networks, and even development banks. The U.S. isn't part of that conversation, and that's by design. India also hosted the G20 summit last year and made it clear that its vision of global economy isn't centered around Western hegemony. It's centered around shared growth, digital inclusion, and resilience. Here's where things get interesting. The U.S. still views influence as hierarchical, top-down. You're either with us or you're against us. But countries like India see it differently. Influence isn't a chain of command. It's a network of trust. India's foreign policy doctrine is simple. Multi-alignment, trade with the U.S., buy arms from Russia, build solar infrastructure with the UAE, partner with Japan on semiconductors. That's not disloyalty. That's smart foreign policy in the 21st century. And for the U.S., that's hard to digest because it means its playbook isn't being followed anymore. Trump's 25% tariff threat isn't just about trade numbers or oil deals. It's It's a reaction to the erosion of leverage. A decade ago, America could get what it wanted with just a phone call. Today, it has to compete on pricing, on influence, on diplomacy. So is the U.S. losing influence? It's not collapsing. But it's no longer the sole decision maker. And in a world where India is rising, Africa is asserting, and Latin America is reorganizing, American dominance isn't a guarantee, it's a negotiation. The real challenge isn't India's strength, it's America's inability to adapt to a world that doesn't wait for instructions. And that is where things are headed, from command to cooperation. Here's a phrase you hear a lot in Indian foreign policy circles: strategic autonomy. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it's possibly one of the most disruptive ideas in 21st century geopolitics. Because what it really means is we partner with everyone, but we obey no one. For decades, the international system was binary. You were either in the American camp or the Soviet one, but today countries like India are reshaping that equation. They're saying we are not interested in being someone's satellite. We are interested in being sovereign economically, militarily, and diplomatically. Now that's powerful, and that's exactly what's frustrating for Washington, because India isn't refusing cooperation. It's refusing alignment with conditions. The U.S. wants India to commit to the Western Bloc fully, especially as tensions with China and Russia grow. But India's response has been crystal clear. We work with you, but we decide the terms. This became obvious during the Russia-Ukraine war. The U.S. expected India to condemn Russia, follow sanctions, and cut energy ties, but India didn't. Not because it supports war, it doesn't, but because it doesn't outsource its foreign policy to another capital. It continued to buy discounted Russian oil, ensuring energy security for its 1.4 billion citizens. And it maintained a neutral stance at the United Nations, choosing diplomacy over division. Now let's look at defense. India is participating in joint exercises with the U.S. Navy while still conducting military drills with Russia and even China. That's not mixed messaging, that's non-aligned pragmatism. India understands that true independence comes from optionality, from not putting all your security eggs in one geopolitical basket. And here's what makes India's position unique. It's not trying to be the next superpower in the traditional sense. It's not invading countries. It's not building foreign bases. It's not pushing ideology. It's just building resilience through manufacturing, energy diversification, space tech, fintech, and diplomacy. This kind of self-determined behavior is exactly what disrupts the legacy power structures. The U.S., for example, often expects loyalty in exchange for partnership. But India is offering something else, equal partnership. It doesn't want to be told who to trade with, who to sanction, or what side of history to stand on. It's choosing its side, India's side. And to be fair, that's what any responsible nation should do. In a multipolar world, sovereignty is the most valuable currency. And India is accumulating it fast by being neutral when it makes sense, firm when it matters, and flexible when it's strategic. So when Trump or any U.S. official complains that India isn't doing enough, what they're really saying is India isn't doing what we want. But that's the whole point. India doesn't need permission anymore. It needs partners, not handlers. Strategic autonomy isn't isolationism, it's intelligent engagement. It's saying we're in the room, we're at the table, but we're here on our own terms. That's not defiance, that's modern diplomacy, and India is mastering it. So here we are. A former U.S. president has threatened a 25% tariff on Indian exports. Negotiations are tense, headlines are loud. But step back, zoom out, and the question becomes, what actually happens next? Well, here's what won't happen. India isn't going to panic. It isn't going to fold under pressure, because this isn't 1991 India. This is 2025 India, a nuclear power, a space innovator, and the largest democracy on the planet. The India that once relied on foreign aid now sends satellites to the moon. The India that once negotiated from weakness now sets the tone at the G20. And in this new world, Economic threats don't work the way they used to. Tariffs might sting temporarily. Yes, Indian exporters, especially in textiles, gems, and electronics, could take a short-term hit, but long-term, this might actually accelerate India's economic pivot. Already, Indian trade officials are deepening ties with Africa, the EU, and the Middle East. Bilateral agreements are being fast-tracked. Rupee-based settlements are expanding, and Make in India is getting more real, not as a slogan, but as a manufacturing reality. The real risk isn't for India, it's for the United States. Because if America leans too hard on pressure, it might push India further toward economic independence and diplomatic hedging. In trying to control the partnership, the US might lose it altogether. Think about it like this. In software, if your platform becomes too closed, developers migrate. In geopolitics, if your diplomacy becomes too conditional, partners diversify. And right now, India is diversifying. But here's the good news. This doesn't have to become a breakdown, it can become a breakthrough. The US and India have shared values: democracy, innovation, and the belief that the future should be shaped, not inherited. If both sides choose respect over control, they can build something far more powerful than a trade deal. They can build a model for equitable global cooperation in a multipolar century. So what happens next? India will continue to rise. It will continue to say no when needed and yes when it makes sense. It will partner, compete, and lead on its own terms, not to dominate the world, but to balance it. The tariff threats, just noise. The real signal is this: the world is changing, and India isn't